It's simple mathematics. It's simple mathematics.
Hello and welcome to the Kicking Assets podcast, where we give the opportunity every week to fill your footy boots as we tackle the intersection of finance and football. I'm Z, aka the reluctant accountant. Yes, I'm a real accountant, not a spicy one. Although it depends who's asking, obviously. And I will be bringing you the stories and information about deals and numbers that happen off the pitch to give you some insight and context to what's happening on the field. And here is my esteemed co-host, Rickie.
What's going on, Z? I am definitely not an accountant, but I'm a radio DJ. But more importantly to this podcast, I'm a massive sports fan. And more importantly, I'm a massive football fan, which is why I'm here to kind of just help fill in the little gaps maybe along the way, if that's possible.
I don't think it's going to be the gaps that you're filling in. I think you're going to be contributing quite a lot, actually. And I'm here for it, because me trying to wade my way through football news is just a disaster.
Well, listen, this is why I'm here. I'm ready.
Okay, we're ready. So are we all relaxed? Are we good to go?
I'm relaxed. I've got my water down here.
Wow.
We've got our two esteemed producers over there.
Staying hydrated. Stay hydrated.
We're good, man.
We're good to go. We're good. Oh, okay. You know what though? I'm not just gonna lie. We just did that with the left hand, and we're in Brixton. Rastaman not like that. So yeah, you see what I'm saying? Okay. Anyway, so what we're gonna do today is we're gonna go through. I'm gonna give you a little story about something financy and football-y, and try to make it a little spicy or sexy. And then we're gonna get into the news. What's been going on during the transfer window? I think it's a good time to talk about football. And yeah, we can get stuff kicked off. So are you ready? Calm, relax. We're gonna go for it.
Let's rock.
Okay, cool. So obviously, as it's the first episode, I'm thinking let me go over the transfer window stuff, right?
Do it.
So obviously,
be gentle with us.
Let me ease people in. Obviously, I always use Vaseline. So what I'm saying,
keep that in.
What I'm saying, obviously, for those, Maggie season fans, they already know what's going on when it's the transfer window. They don't need me to explain it. That's fine, but we're talking to everybody, okay? And also, a lot of them may not know that, 20 years ago, this system wasn't in place. So at the time, players could be traded up until the 31st of March every year. And it was chaos. It wasn't chaos. They managed to get through it. But it's actually a little bit mad because, you know what, when I was in primary school, I was a baller. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, man, but yeah. I could.
But you play, yeah?
I could kick 2-2 ball. You get me?
What position did you play?
Listen, don't ask me my questions. First of all, I don't know why you're doing this. This is not an interview, okay? So basically, but I used to play. Listen, if you went to my primary school, tell
you
this
used to kick ball, yeah? You used to kick ball.
Listen, I had little 2-2 moves, and I used to be blasting people in their face. It was a fun time.
Techers,
yeah. Cool. So you know what it is, and it's like, them man in the playground that were glory hunters, and they're playing on a side, and as I was losing, and all of a sudden they're like, I was on that team anyway, da-da-da-da. That's what the league would be like. Do you know what I mean? Because, basically, you think about it, if you're, a really good player and you're on a team and they're losing, come end the league. You're like, all right, cool, my man's winning, yeah. Let me see if I can get in some negotiations, quickly go over there, whatever. Those glory hunters, I'm telling you, they didn't grow up, they just got bigger and they started playing football. So this is the thing. So they can't have that. It's a little bit chaotic to have people kind of going back and forward, throughout the league. Because also, on the reverse of that, you could also have clubs that are got a bit of money, they're going for the title. Yeah. The losing clubs, they've got some star players. They'll just be poaching all the players. Yeah,
if I'm honest, I actually preferred it when it was like that.
Oh, okay,
just because
savage.
As a fan, it was nice to know that at any given moment, a player could leave or join a club. I used to like that. So, but that's just me from back in the day.
Listen, that's savage.
However, if you look at it from the perspective of a smaller team, say, that's fighting relegation, you could get a bigger team come in midway through the season and poach your best player.
That's madness.
And that's not fair.
No, it isn't fair. And I think it's one of those things that you kind of give with one hand and take away with the other. Because obviously there's that excitement of oh my God, who's going to take him or whatever. But there's also nah, give the little guy a chance.
Yeah.
Not capitalism everywhere. Do you know what I mean? Like, we need to ease off. So it's really funny that obviously they had that system, they brought this in, and it was actually like a little deal with the European Commission to bring some like contract stability to players and clubs.
right.
So it's like we got these two transfer windows, summer and winter. That's when all of the deals get done.
However, the winter transfer window, so the one that opens, I think it's January 1st,
Yeah.
is for me a waste of time. Mainly because you've got a lot of players who have already played like 3 or 4 months for their club. They can be cup tied, which means that they can't play in certain competitions if they do move.
So you're saying you're going in for just a big summer bang?
I prefer the summer transfer window, the one that we're in now.
Yeah.
That's the one for the big dogs.
Okay, cool. So if you're listening, Rickie has said we need to get rid of that winter thing. He's not on it. He's not on it. So there, sorted. That'll be done. Like, just give it a few minutes. Yeah. So I think actually I can see what you're saying, and you don't hear as much about the winter transfer window. It's not as big of a deal. Do you know what I mean?
It's not.
And I think. Yeah, so I think it's interesting what you say, but I guess they have it to kind of space things out. And also, you imagine though being tied into your job for your like whole contract. Like they're like, nah, man, you can't leave. There's no notice period. They can't put you on garden leave. Nothing. It's just like you're there and you stay.
Things do happen in that transfer window. Obviously, you might have, my team. I support Liverpool, and then we had a listen.
No, I'm LIVERP, double O Liverpool FC. Yeah.
But like you might get a situation where your team might have a lot of injuries, unforeseen injuries. People can't like account for that. So the January transfer window then comes in handy because you might need to draw somebody in, and bolster your squad. So it's good for things like that.
Yeah, like kind of little, like a.
But for your marquee signings, it's rare. Although we did sign one of our best players ever, Virgil van Dijk, in the January transfer window. So I'm chatting.
So yeah, basically you're just trying to bite the hand that feeds you, innit? Like the hand that caresses you and makes you feel good about football. You're like, you know what? I don't want it. I want us to struggle until this summer. This is what you want. Okay, so ignore what he said before. He actually really loves the winter transfer window. No, but you know what was really funny for me? Like when I was like younger, which was obviously just yesterday, I used to, you hear obviously players bought and swapped and whatever, but I always used to get confused about this like whole free transfer thing, and I was like, rah, them man are just free. They're like, wow, like bargain basement. I was thinking like Poundland thing. Obviously now I know, as a fully formed adult, that I know it's like
bargain basement.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, they're just rubbish, innit? They're just free. That's it. Like they'll just give them away because they don't even want them anymore.
I understand why you think that, because like if somebody's going for free, you're like, well, why are they free? Why does no one want to pay for them?
There's no value.
There's no value.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, there's more intricacies to it.
And it's more about like fee free, isn't it? It's like there's no fee.
Exactly.
Yeah. So because the funny thing is, I was looking in, and I'm gonna say it right.
Go on.
The Bosman Ruling.
Go on.
Did I do it?
Nailed it.
The Bosman Ruling. Yeah.
Bosman or Bosman?
Bosman. Oh, what was it? It was wrong, wasn't it? Let's run that bit back.
I'm not a linguist. I don't know.
Jean-Marc Bosman. Okay.
No, but on a real,
he was Belgian.
I actually don't know if it is Bosman. Everyone says Bosman, but it might be Bosman.
Okay, Bossman. Yeah. The Bosman Ruling don't have nothing to do with Morley's, actually. And it happened in 1995. Okay, so quickly, because I actually did a video about this. And basically, obviously in 1995, they had the Bosman Ruling, which changed the game of football.
Absolutely.
I think most football fans will agree that it was something that was kind of fundamentally changed how everything. But the madness behind it, I know why. So some people don't like what happened afterwards, but the madness behind it. This man's playing at Liège, right?
Yep.
He's coming to the end of his contract, and he's like, "Boom, I want to bounce." Yeah.
Yep.
So he enters talks with Dunkirk.
Right.
Where they had a war. There was another war over his transfer. Liège was like, yeah, we need £1 billion. It wasn't pounds, and it wasn't even euros because they weren't on that at that time. But like, I don't know what it was, but it was a lot of money, and Dunkirk were not on that.
That's right.
So the whole thing fell through, and my man became a slave.
Yes.
A slave. He took a 70% pay cut, and he's actually poor now. Shout out to you, innit? Anyway, but like,
is he really?
Yeah,
No
he's
way.
a little bit broke. I'm not gonna lie.
I didn't know that.
And I read an article, possibly a bit bitter.
Wow.
I'm so sorry.
Wow. In fairness, though, that period of time in the football kind of like landscape, there wasn't as much money as there is now. So.
No, there wasn't. And I think that...
But that situation that happened with him allowed the money to flourish.
A lot of... And also sponsors came in, and as you will be aware, as an expert in that field, the 3+2 ruling got rid of... You know what was really funny about that? So 3+2 is obviously, you can only have a maximum of 3 foreign players, and two of them have to be youth graduates from
Homegrown,
the academy,
yep.
which is good. We like to help the youth, okay? Children are the future. So, but we like to do that. But you know what was really funny is that I was looking into it, and like England got shafted by that because Scotland and Wales were considered foreign countries. So if you had two man from Wales, that's it, innit? They're taking up like 60% of your... Do you know what I mean? You can't even get a little Schwave remarque or whatever. No Zidane.
And what I would say as well, the English game, the national game suffered from that, because obviously... Like you mentioned, like off camera before, it meant that like the English players weren't getting that opportunity to like flourish in the teams, which meant that the national team suffered massively at major tournaments and whatnot, which we've seen over the years of England getting knocked out in the quarterfinals every time.
England men.
Up until quite recently.
England men.
The Lionesses.
They know what they're doing. That's why they're the hunters.
Heavy.
You understand?
Heavy.
So I feel like it was just a very interesting time. And I think when you're thinking about transfers and whatever, and we were talking about this before about like, for me, interesting transfers, it's just so funny because it's like, there's football and then there's the deals behind it. There's the business behind it.
Yep.
And one that I have to talk about was David Beckham.
I mean, huge.
Because you might not know this, right? But David Beckham and we've got like a little affinity, yeah?
Okay.
Because obviously, as I mentioned to you, I'm a bit of a baller. I was or whatever. So he got his free kick thing from me. That's
Are you right or left-footed?
Listen, you ask a lot of questions. Like you're moving like the FBI. Like
David Beckham was right-footed.
Listen, it doesn't matter. What matters is that and also he had like a movie named in his honor, as did I. Obviously, his is Bend It Like Beckham.
Yeah.
Mine being
was
The Accountant.
Oh yes.
Obviously, because I'm an accountant. Also, I'll kill you. So like it worked. Obviously, I'm not a white man. I know I'm not Ben Affleck, people. Like I know that, but I
Good
also
film though. Good
yeah,
film.
exactly. So that's what I'm saying, and I have that in me. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a dark side.
I can see that about you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're both inspired really big blockbusters. So shout out to us, innit? Innit, Dave. So David Beckham, he goes over. Coming to the end of his 4-year contract, it was 37 million, and he seems to take this like really big pay cut and leaves Los Merengues. Again, do you say Los Merengues? He leaves Los Merengues, he leaves Real Madrid, and he goes over to LA Galaxy, and he's getting about 6 million a year,
right?
Which seems ridiculous, but this is where the business comes in. I love it, and I love it because it's like he also negotiated with this contract that he had a percentage of revenue. And it wasn't just a percentage of like, ticket sales. It was everything.
See, I didn't know that at the time. All I heard at the time in my brain was David Beckham's leaving Real Madrid. He's going to the MLS, which it wasn't even...
It wasn't what it is today.
No,
yeah, exactly.
But all I heard was 250 million, 5 years contract, and at the end of it, he gets a franchise. That's all I heard.
So he did end up getting that. And like when I say percentage of everything, I said even hot dogs. Yeah, that was yeah. And that man loved hot dogs in America, innit? So on that alone, he was hitting 220. You get me? So like after that, it was easy. So he got, obviously it was the 250 over the 5 years. But the smart thing about that, and this is why me and David, like we bet on our own sauce, innit? Like that, we're the same. I'm telling you, we're the same. He don't know it yet. Like he might have blocked me. But anyway, so like the thing is, he bet on himself, and he knew the value that he brought to the MLS. Do you know what I mean? Major League Soccer, for those people that don't know. He knew the value that he would bring to that thing, and so
at the time he was arguably the biggest footballer in terms of profile on the planet, and obviously one of the biggest stars on the planet.
100%, and also as part of that brand Beckham, like it was just something that was quite phenomenal, and I really rate that about them in terms of like knowing what you have and how to kind of really capitalize on that. And so when he did this, so when he negotiated this deal, and the deal was upon retirement he would be able to buy into the MLS franchise team or whatever for 23 million. Now from the MLS point of view, that was a good deal at the time because like Toronto FC had just been come in for like 8 million. So 23 is loads more.
Yeah.
Okay, but when the Roosters came home, okay, by the time he had gone and injected his David Beckhamness into MLS, now I think it was March 2020 when they've gone in. I think they're valued at the 10th most valuable franchise. I think it's like 580 something million, 24 times the 23 million. Like it really is into Miami. Okay, well done you. Well done, David. So he's done really well. And I love that foresight. And I think when you bet on yourself, it's like, it's different.
Do you know why it's crazy as well? Because obviously David Beckham, he bet on himself. He knew that he was bringing so much to the team and to the league in itself as well. And he was one of the first footballers to do that, like to have a brand that kind of transcended sport.
Yeah.
And down the years now, we've seen other players try and do that and emulate that. Cristiano Ronaldo's done that as well.
Yeah.
Lionel Messi. They've got massive brands, Neymar, we can name loads. And it's gone full circle because Lionel Messi has now joined Inter Miami, which is just
which is beautiful,
moment.
which is simpatico. I love the like synchronicity. You know what I was going to also say is it's a model that actually they'd figured out in the US a long time ago. So if you think about when you man were young, because not me, but like obviously you had like Michael Jordan.
What's wrong with her?
Me, I'm very young,
Just
you know.
shots fired every other sentence. I love it.
When you old man were wee nippers, okay, you'll remember things like Space Jam, or you'd remember, like those kind of, and also even like people that you wouldn't really know about now, but like Allen Iversons and stuff like that from the NBA that they had their AI thing going, and that was. Again, I don't know the intricacies of those deals, but again, it's about that brand. It's about
that brand. And fun fact, David Beckham famously wore the number 7 at Manchester United. When he went to Real Madrid,
23.
he chose
23
because of
Jordan.
Michael Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you. I know a few things.
That was good.
Yeah, thank you. Bro, he told me before he was going to do that, he was like, what do you think? He was asking me. So I was like,
yeah.
I think it's a good look.
Great look.
I just think it was a really good deal. It was a really fascinating deal. He ended up, obviously, he bet on himself. And it's one of those things, I think in other places as well, you take the royalties, don't you? You go for the royalties, even if you're broke.
Yeah.
Bet on yourself.
Yeah.
Believe in your source. And that's what he did.
And if I'm honest, he took the MLS from being, like a league that wasn't really regarded as anything on the spectrum of the football
100%.
league. And then you saw players like Steven Gerrard go there, Robbie Keane went there. Various other players that maybe coming to the end of their careers, not going at the height of their carer, but you're still getting decent names going to the league and kind of like boosting it. So David Beckham effect, it was good.
Yeah, shout out to my man David Beckham. Well done. We did good. So transfer window. We are here.
Transfer window.
What is going down?
Summer transfer window.
Summer transfer window.
The one we like.
The one he likes, apart from in the winter when you get the best players. Okay.
So obviously, there's been a good few transfers so far. I think for me at the moment, the big story is Chelsea FC.
Okay.
And mainly because about a year ago there was a big hoo-ha around their owner, Roman Abramovich. He had links with, like political links and Allegedly.
Okay.
And he had to sell the club. He sold the club. A guy called Todd Bowley comes in and he's an American. He's coming with like a whole different mindset. He's got like a whole different way of doing things. And he just goes on a massive spending spree and buys a lot of players. Like we're talking an unusual amount of players that he's bought for the team.
So what do you think about this? Because obviously this is not a red pill podcast, but if it were, we could talk about sugar daddies. And essentially what these men are sugar daddies for these clubs.
Yeah, but
Is that not unfair?
It is unfair, but that's football, and that's just the landscape of.
So you feel like the poorer team should be just doing OnlyFans?
I mean,
I'm figuring out.
If it's going to bring in the peas.
Okay, Rickie says you man need to get your OnlyFans OF, be in those Twitter replies, being like, oh, I think she's cute, like that. Check my page out. No, but it does, and it's one of those things that speaks back to the Bosman ruling with this kind of injection of wealth and injection of money that comes into it, and you increase these disparities. And the issue is, whilst it is exciting, there's money. If you didn't have that money, the players would still want to play, right?
They would.
So there's there's an argument that the money could be better distributed down to the grassroots clubs.
Absolutely, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. But that's just not the way that it works. That's not the way of the world, is it? And so this
you're
guy's...
just going to have to be happy with quarterfinals for England. That's all I'm saying. But go ahead.
So Tom Boehly's come in. He's bought an obscene amount of players. He's bought players that, you know, they didn't really need, in my opinion. Some called it a scattergun approach to kind of the transfer market, and he's ended up with an inflated squad, a squad that's too big to manage because you've got too many players, so they can't all play. So you've got unrest in the dressing room. He's now also got the situation of trying to claw back like the balance sheet, trying to balance things out. He's trying to like not get fined by FFP, financial fair play. So he's had to sell a lot of players in this transfer window to try and balance the books. So that's why we've seen a mass exodus of players from Chelsea. So the likes of who went, Kai Havertz has gone to Arsenal, Koulibaly has gone to Saudi Arabia, N'Golo Kante has gone to Saudi Arabia, Mason Mount's going to Manchester United. That's not done yet, but it probably will be by this time this goes out. And I think from that, he's made about just over 120 million just from those transfers, like 70 million here, 60 million there, 25 million there. So yeah, we're looking at the whole situation of overspending and then trying to draw it back. Because
but that is interesting as well, because you mentioned about kind of evening out the balance sheet, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the FFP, they've got some sort, it's not salary cap per se, but there's a rule about spending in terms of like a percentage of your revenue or something like this.
Yeah, I mean, as a fan, I'm not an accountant.
Yeah. I mean, neither. God, I hate them.
But from what I gather, it's quite wishy-washy. Like you can get
but that's what I'm thinking. So
easily.
So what I'm saying, because obviously, and I think we've discussed this before, but you know, with the NBA and they've got and NFL, they've got their salary caps, and it's very, very much defined, and it works for the structure of those leagues, because they're not like us. There's no relegation, promotion. It's just
which
franchise.
is wild to me.
It is really wild. I literally only learned that.
I think that's so dead.
No, but you know what? It's also kind of exciting because your team will actually have a chance. Because if you, for example, support Liverpool, no, I'm joking. But if you support like a, but if you support a team that perhaps doesn't ever have a chance, especially because of the way the structure of the draft is, there's a chance that your team can touch silver. Yeah,
that's true. However, I think if there's no jeopardy of ever being relegated, then what are you fighting for? If you're a team that's like, say, let's talk about the team that Stormzy and Zaha have just bought. They're like in a league that I don't even know. Like, but
I mean, it's Croydon. What did you expect?
Listen, don't disrespect Croydon. Don't disrespect Croydon.
You know,
don't come for you.
I mean, I'm ready. I'm ready.
But there's a pyramid system that would allow them, if they're successful enough, that they can climb that pyramid and they could make it to the top of the tree. They could.
In theory.
In theory.
Yeah.
But the hope is what drives us. Right?
Yeah.
That's why we support teams. It's the hope. It's the hope of it.
Yeah.
If that hope isn't there, what's the point? If I'm an owner of a team and I know that we can never get relegated, I don't know why I'd be. If I'm an owner, you're going to like that. But as a fan, you want the chance to be able to elevate yourself and to get higher up the tree.
But then that's why they have, like, because they do have their like playoffs and everything else like that, and it is quite exciting.
Yeah, playoffs are fine. I like the playoffs. Playoffs are cool.
And I just think like, and if you take it to, for example, the Jordan story, where Chicago Bulls didn't do very well before they got Jordan, but because they didn't do well, they got to pick him, and he was like third pick that year.
I like that. I like the draft pick. I like that the best players go to like the teams that aren't performing so well. I like that. That's a good idea.
But it also means that across the team they're better paid, because the average players have access to money that would have otherwise go to the star. There's more money available. But it's interesting, obviously, and I think we've discussed this before in terms of how players sit on the balance sheet in the UK. So players. Obviously, what will happen is if you've bought a player and you spoke about him getting all this money in, but actually it's a transfer of assets. So on those new clubs, they'll have these assets. And what happens, and players are quite unique in that they are employees, even though they can't just put in their 1 month notice anymore and just leave, because Rickie wants you to leave whenever you can. But you can't. You have to wait to leave. But they are employees. They are employees of the club, but they're also assets. So and the difference is, normally if you have an employee, it goes through the P&L, the profit and loss, their wages, you go through and it's an expense. Assets they generate money.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know all of you know what assets are because you've read Rich Dad Poor Dad, but there's other things that go on as well in terms of an accounting. And they sit and they're depreciated over the life of their contract. So and that's how it's expressed, which is interesting because young players that come up through the youth academy, they're valued at zero. They have no value.
Yeah, and I think this is why we get a lot of using Chelsea as an example as well at the moment. There's a player there called Mason Mount. He's a product of their academy system. He's made it to the first team. He went out on loan. He came back, made it to the first team. He's an England international. But because Todd Bowley has gone out and bought all of these players, he's now seeing an influx of players coming in who are on much bigger wages than him just because they've come from somewhere else. And he's going, well, I should be on parity with them. And they're going, well, we don't really have to pay you that because you're already here. We didn't pay anything for you. So sorry. So he's going, well, then I'll leave. And that's how it kind of like works.
But it's interesting as well because I mean, I didn't take my football career professional. I just decided to give other people a chance.
You should have.
I know, right? I mean, I've still got time. I'm very young. So it's really interesting what you were saying because it's something that I recognise from the corporate structure. You know, there's an up or out culture where it's like you ever get a big pay rise or whatever. There's no job for life. You know, we're moving. True. I'm moving like a baller in the finance sector. Don't worry, like you know what I mean. Pay me the money or I'm gonna go. So, but I think that is interesting, and I think also inherently unfair. Like you know, if I'm good enough, I should be able to command this you know X amount of money.
Yeah, I think in terms of homegrown players, they only really get paid what they're worth when somebody comes in for them and there's a risk of losing that asset, or if it's blatantly obvious, like it's a generational talent, and then that's when they get paid the big bucks. So yeah,
that's what I would have been. So yeah, I guess. I don't know why you're laughing. You know what? Please, you man, you man from Beckham that knew me in it. No, I was a baller. Like tell these people them. It's just rude at this point. So yeah, so you've spoken about Chelsea. What else is going on?
Okay, so there's a player called Ruben Neves. He left Wolverhampton Wanderers. He was being courted by Barcelona. European superpower, one of the best teams in the land, and he decided off the back of an offer coming in from Saudi Arabia, a new league, like a league that's kind of like on the up, to go there and triple his wages. So he's only 26, so he's still about to hit the peak of his powers. So it's, to me as a fan, it's wild to see somebody at the peak of their powers. Could have gone to a European superpower and won like many honours, but has decided to take the money. Now, I mean, if it was me, I would have gone for the money as well. But I don't have that talent, and I would want to win. I think you get into football, I assume, because you want to win things, and he's not going to do that in Saudi Arabia.
You know what, you say
to
that
the level of what he could.
And I get that because obviously, especially growing up in the UK, and people don't do it as much anymore. But I grew up when people would like play football in the streets and stuff like that, and there was always like some kid coming home from school with a ball at their feet. I don't even know who this is. I need to go back and look it up. But I saw this dude. He plays in the NBA, right? And I don't know. He's like Eastern European or whatever. This man has no, like, he's just like, well, who likes their job like this? Like, he's so and he just doesn't care. And so actually, it is a job to them. Like, we think of it as like, this vocation, this calling or whatever.
Some players are human beings at the end of the day. And there are some players that are just like I know a player who shall remain nameless, who says, I'm just good at football. I don't like football. I'll come in and be like, did you see the game of the weekend? They'd be like, bro, I don't watch games. Like, I don't actually like it. Yeah. Like, I was just okay at it and I made a career out of it. So, but I'm not a football fan.
It's just a really funny thing. I think, especially when you are a football fan, to look and be like, what? I would love to do that. Not me, obviously, because I just turned it down myself. But like for other people watching, that's their dream. And people are like, oh, it's just a job, innit? Like I'm just, hopefully I can get my sick pay and all, like that kind of, like it's just a very funny thing, I think.
It is well.
And I think, so it's really interesting that you were saying that about the situation of going to Saudi Arabia. Also, I find it interesting how when choices like that are made, everybody gets on their moral high ground about things. They
do. Well, obviously, there's a situation at the moment. Obviously, we had a similar situation with China. There was a Chinese kind of Super League a few years ago where there was an influx of a lot of money and they were poaching or luring players over there for like ridiculous amounts of money. Even before that, there was a Russian league that had a lot of money in it as well that was doing a similar thing. I think the Saudi league, if you look at that region of the world and how they're infiltrating sport across the board. They're doing it with boxing. A lot of big boxing fights are going to Saudi Arabia. There's a Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and now they're doing football as well. So some people are saying it's kind of like a way of kind of, moving the eyes of what people don't like about that region in terms of like human rights issues and whatnot, and kind of getting their eyes away from that and going, yeah, but hey, we've got all this money, come and play football for us, or we can put on the best Grand Prix, or we can put on the best boxing matches. Some people might say that's up for debate.
I mean, and the thing is, I think there is an argument you can make about that, but I think we live in a capitalist world. There is no ethical consumption under capitalism.
Agreed.
And I think also there tends to be a lot of brouhaha come up when these things, like when you mentioned that region of the world and whatever.
Yeah.
But actually, like he who's without sin cast the first stone. What's Catholic upbringing? Let he who is without sin cast the first. Yeah, don't know. What do you mean? There's bear war in the Bible. Are you crazy? I read it twice. But like genuinely, and I think there's a lot of hypocrisy that takes place. You know what I mean? Because we'll say that, but we're quite happy to trade arms and do things like those deals with those man there.
To simplify it, the bottom line is, into the everyday person, is if you get offered 2 jobs and one's offering you X amount and one's offering you a smaller amount, which one are you going to go for?
But also, I don't think it's fair for it to fall to an individual to be the conscientious objector when you, as a government or something, have a policy where you're dealing with them man anyway. Like, hold on, why do I need to suffer? I'm not the social experiment. You do your laws and follow them, and me too, I'll follow them. So, it's an interesting one. So,
what do you think, though? Do you think that as a player, like Ruben Neves in particular, who, like I said, don't get me wrong, he's not, I wouldn't say he's a top tier player, but he's a good Premier League player. And he could have gone on to have like a great career in Europe still, where you could be highly regarded, you could win some top trophies, or moving across to Saudi Arabia.
It's a funny one.
And triple your pay. And we're talking about, this is like creating generational wealth for some of these players.
Well, first of all, let me say, generational wealth is lost within the first or second generation. You need to teach your kids to keep it going, because they're gonna spend it. They're gonna lose it. They're gonna lose it. But no, but I understand what you're saying, and I think it's a really interesting thing. And I think I've discussed this with my brother actually. He's really into like sports and whatever else like that. And he made the point, and I think it's a really interesting one. One injury and you could be out of it.
True.
So actually go in and get as much money as you can when you can get it, because
it's a short career
it's
as
not
well.
guaranteed. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's very easy to stand here and go, no, I would do it for the love and whatever. But actually, when the money's offered on the table, and I don't know what background he comes from, if this is life-changing money for him, his family, or whatever. It makes sense to kind of go, you know what, let me get what I can, because I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years.
I'm securing the bag.
Listen.
It's a discussion.
Innit? Because you can always watch La Liga on television.
Listen, I got FIFA, PlayStation,
this is what I'm saying,
you
innit?
can play anywhere.
Yeah, I got to walk out. It's fine, don't worry. That. Yeah, of course. So I think there's that. I understand if you're, a fanatic, if you're an impassioned football lover, going and getting that glory and soaking it in. But you know what? When your foot broke, that ain't gonna help. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, wow, at least they took pictures of me.
Real talk.
So yeah, I think people have to kind of judge the situation on their own, moral compass and whatever else for them. And I think it's very easy for us to judge and kind of go, well, I wouldn't do that. Well, how do you know? No one's offering you, babe. Okay? You're not doing it because you can't play football. That's why. Not because you had a choice. So I do think it's an interesting one, but I do, and again, going back to the conversation that I had with my brother, I think it's interesting, especially because it's true. There isn't anything that's guaranteed. You don't know. Like, this could happen, and in a year's time, it could all just be over. And you were like, no, I wanted to go and really represent football. None of it. Like, do you know what I mean? So I think people have to do whatever.
It's a fair point. It's a very.
So I think definitely people have to do whatever's good for them.
One thing I wanted to speak about as well was the transfer of Declan Rice.
Okay.
So he went from West Ham. He was their captain. He's recently gone from West Ham to Your team?
Arsenal, come on, you
British
Gunners.
transfer record breaking fee of £105 million.
That's what we do, we break records. We break records.
You don't break records.
You know what's the joke about this? I'm there, we, like I'm French, right? But like, I haven't watched the match in time. I'm not even gonna lie. We break records. Shout out to us, innit?
Absolutely huge. Like, that's a massive deal.
And it is, and it's funny because you almost think we become desensitized to the numbers as well when we have these things. And I think it's also this thing where I don't know, like it's an amount of money that I can't even really fathom and whatever, but there's a lot of pressure that comes with that as well.
People will say that there isn't, and like, but there totally is.
There is.
I've heard interviews with, you know, players of yesteryear, and they've said like, yeah, I went for this amount of money. It definitely put pressure on me when I went there. It shouldn't, because you're not in control of how much somebody wants to buy you for.
Yeah. But it does, because there's an expectation. Absolutely. We've spent so much money on you, and now we're expecting, you know, that to pay off. And even that, like, the anxiety of it and whatever, I don't know. I just think it's a lot of pressure. But I guess time will tell, and some people rise to that. Some people thrive in that kind of environment, and others don't. I think you know what I've always found interesting?
Go on.
You've come in for 60 million, yeah? Because this happens in every workplace. Like, bruv, you know how much he's on, whatever, and he don't do nothing. You get me? And like, what happens then? Like, are you like beefing with them, man?
So that's why certain teams and certain kind of clubs have a philosophy where they're like, we're not going to go for like the top tier players. We'll buy the players that are going to become stars. Liverpool, my team, tend to buy players that are on the up, mainly because they can't compete in the realms of Manchester Cities and Man Utd and whatnot. So they tend to buy players that are about to become stars, so that when you buy them, the outlay isn't as much, and you don't have to worry about like paying astronomical wages. You can build up to that over the course of their contract.
But I do think that there must be a certain amount of cohesion that would, or like incohesiveness, if you like, if they've just got a few stars that are in, and you're not on that. You're not touching that, innit? And you're like,
you can sprinkle the fruit.
Is it? Yeah, you missed that, innit? I passed it to you. What happened? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna be like that. I'm gonna be like a little bit funny about it. I'm gonna wake up early so I can hate for longer. But like, so I do think it's a really interesting thing. And I was just trying to think of something. It's one of those things that I think, when you're approaching a team, because initially, who was it that started buying loads of players and they weren't doing nothing, fam?
I think Spurs, maybe.
Was it when they were they just were buying loads?
I think they sold, well, it's happened across a number of teams, but I remember there was a time when Spurs sold Gareth Bale to Real Madrid for like 85 million.
Yeah.
Record at the time. And they, with all that cash, they spent on, you know, 5 or 6, 7 players, and none of them really gelled. They bought in too much too soon.
And that's the thing as well. And I think, you know, obviously, I'm here for finance, but the psychology of it. And the reason I say that, because a lot of the time when people ask my opinion on something, whether it's to do with finance or economics or whatever, I'm really interested in like behavioral economics, because there's what you would expect would happen, the pure, you know, if everything, given all of these factors, what will happen. And actually we're dealing with people, and we're actually quite irrational as well, you know, like in certain things. And so it sounds great buying all these stars and we're just going to have a team full of stars, but we have egos and we have other things that come into play. And actually what you're doing is you could be just setting yourself up for a fail. Which is
why Liverpool don't buy stars.
Oh my God.
Because they don't want to upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
So if you've got somebody coming in, a bit like at Chelsea, Mason Mount, he's gone, right, I'm come through the academy, I've given Chelsea my absolute all, I'm an England international, I've proved my worth, but you're buying players in my position, but you're not paying me parity. So that's where you get unrest, and that's where you can mess up the apple cart, as it were.
You're absolutely right. It probably would upset the apple cart. So we're also going to upset the apple cart here, because unfortunately that is the end of today's episode. We will be back next week. Rickie's going to join me again.
100%.
It hasn't been too awful.
It's been good, man.
Amazing. So next week I'm going to be talking about insurance. I know it sounds boring, but hello, come on, it's going to be great. We're going to talk about insurance, players, clubs, whatever else like that. And it does actually get really interesting. But not only that, what do you think is coming up in the next week?
Well, obviously, loads more transfers. But I think there might even be a sale of a club, a massive club. Maybe Manchester United will be sold in that time.
Not Man U.
Maybe,
wow, look at that. So let me just find my eBay login so I can put my bid in. So next week, I may own Manchester United. It's been a great episode. It's been a pleasure to be here with all of you. And we'll see you next week. This episode was produced by Neodate Evans, Justin Chinieri, and was filmed in Renaissance Studios in Brixton.
Kicking the asset.